Tired of bloating, fatigue and sluggish digestion? Meet your gut's new best friend, NutriHealth 365's microbiome supplement. Restore balance, boost immunity, and feel amazing from the inside out. Smart delay release capsules. Real results. Gut health just got personal.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Friday's episode of Trending, brought to you by NutriHealth 365. Well, we've made it to the end of another very interesting and eventful week, wherever you may be around the world, and there's plenty for us to talk about this morning, what's going on in the news. But for this first section, I want to talk about something which is, I guess, a bit close to home in terms of backlash, but also something that's very, very important in terms of staying sane in this crazy world that we live in. And that's trolls. That's internet trolls, particularly on social platforms like Twitter. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the last few months, the aggression of these trolls towards anyone who is talking about anything that remotely questions the official narrative of lots of different issues, whether that be Trump and Epstein, whether that be the war in the Middle East, whether that be climate change, whatever it might be, there seems to be so much aggression and anger coming from these trolls aimed at anybody questioning anything, whether they're questioning something from a minute perspective or whether they're questioning the whole shebang. And whenever things like that happen, I think it's very clear and very easy to observe and say, well, that's not organic. That seems to be by design, and that seems to be something that is coordinated. Now, when you look into internet trolls and you look into the whole concept of people online that are purely there to abuse and discredit or try and discredit the arguments of anyone that may be questioning the official narrative of anything, you realise that pretty much every major country in the world and every major military in the world has, quite literally, paid members of staff whose job it is to go and attack people online. We understand from the research that in Israel there's at least 30,000. Now, in a country the size of Israel, if there's 30,000, imagine how many there is in the US military, in the UK military, in the French military, in the German military, and so on. So when you add that together, you're talking a massive, massive number of people internationally whose job it is to attack anybody online who is questioning, who is to coordinate efforts to silence them, to censor them, to stop them from being able to speak at events and so on, to rile up local social and activist groups to try and protest against people. We've seen all this firsthand. We've seen it firsthand with ourselves when the campaign against anti-Semitism were literally a man and a dog organisation. However, enough was done online to rile enough people up that, it wasn't many, but you had a handful of people turn up at certain shows of ours trying to disrupt. They didn't succeed, but they tried. And we've seen that across anyone who maybe calls out the clear Trump presidency that is just an absolute fake in comparison to what it was sold as. You've seen that again, anyone who calls out, or not so much these days because they've crossed the threshold where too many people are asking questions. But anyone that used to question Israel and their behaviour until very recently used to get the full throttle of these organisations and full throttle of these internet trolls. Whereas now it seems to not be so exclusive to anyone with a major account or anyone with a big following or anyone that's been around for a while. It seems to just be around for anyone. And I always think that communication of any sort, communication is incredibly important, because if you are treating somebody with some respect and you're listening to their argument and you are making your judgments on their argument, based on the evidence they put forward, based on their research and so on, then that's a great way to communicate, because what you're doing is you're arguing or debating in what I would say good faith, which is that if somebody brings some substance to an argument that makes you question the validity of yours, you're open to that. You're open to new knowledge. You're open to new information that maybe might make you think and see things slightly differently. To me, that is what growth looks like. If you are sat here now, absolutely adamant that this computer is green when it's clearly not, and someone points out to you that it's blue, but you will vehemently deny to the death the fact that it's blue, who's the idiot? It's you, isn't it? Because you're stopping yourself from being able to grow and acknowledge something that is clearly accurate because you either don't want to admit that you maybe were wrong the first time, or you don't want to give someone on the other side some credit for potentially bringing some information that is right. And that is what we see. What I've just described is what we see daily in interactions on Twitter, on X. People come in, and I've had this a lot recently, people come in with a very fixed, preconceived idea of something that's happened, of what you're like as a person, and all of those things. They'll make sweeping statements with such confidence that what they're saying is true. And despite the fact you then carefully and detailed point out why they're inaccurate, they're not interested. They will just double down and keep saying the same thing without providing any further evidence for their initial claim. To me, debating with these people is a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of time, it's a complete waste of energy, and it does get you frustrated because it can, and I think social media can do this, it can give you a really skewed view of the world where you're sat there going, look, people are not interested. They don't want to listen. They don't want to hear the truth. They just want to argue about whatever they think they're right about. And that's not reality because the world isn't online. These people that have a fake picture, that don't even use their real name, that have a handful of followers, that purely seem to just attack people, they're irrelevant. They don't matter. They're probably people sat in military bases paid to do exactly what they're doing, or they're deeply troubled people who seem to, have it as their life's mission to abuse others rather than get up and go and do something themselves. They'll dictate to you what you should be researching and what you should be talking about rather than going, I've not noticed anybody talking about this area I think is interesting, so I'll tell you what, I'll research it. I'll talk about it. I'll start a podcast. No, they project all of that responsibility onto others and feel they have the right to demand and dictate to people what it is they should be reading, what it is they should be writing about, who they should be talking to, with such arrogance. Why do we listen to those people? And the reason I felt this was important to talk about this morning, and I'm a very open book when it comes to emotions with people. I got down this week because a couple of people were just going at me about something which is completely false. I very easily and very quickly detailed why what they were saying was false, and they've done exactly what I just described, which is they're not interested. They're just reaffirming it. And it did annoy me for about an hour. And I thought, you know what? What on earth are you doing, mate? I got home from work. My two kids were like, what's wrong? Because I was obviously seemed a bit down. And I just snapped myself out of it and thought, why are you letting this person or these people who are completely irrelevant, who probably aren't even real people, why are you letting them impact the time you're having at home with your family when you've been out since 5:30 this morning? You've not seen your kids all day. This is the first time you've seen them, and you're letting this ridiculous person influence negatively the time you're having with them. What on earth are you doing? And I snapped myself out of it. And since then, I've been very compelled to talk about it, because how many people daily go through exactly what I've just described, where they let people online get them down. And I'm not just talking about people talking about conspiratorial stuff or people questioning narratives. I'm talking about people in general. How many young people post pictures on Instagram and then get down if someone puts a nasty comment? How many people get down if they don't get as many likes as they think they should? The amount of influence that people we don't know, and people who, if we walk past in the street, we wouldn't know them from Adam. People that don't know us as people, the amount of influence we let them have over our lives, or people let them have over their lives through social media, mainly because face-to-face people are very different. The abuse that people get online, very, very few people that write this, that and the other would dare to say that to somebody's face. And I think that's a really good way of living online. And when I say living online, I mean your persona online is don't have one. Be the same person. Don't say anything online that you wouldn't say if that person was stood right in front of you. If we lived like that, then Twitter, for a start, would be a much more harmonious place. And if some teenage girl posts a picture, if she was stood in front of you and walked past you in the street, you wouldn't go, "You're really ugly." But people will comment that on that person's profile online. Why? For what possible purpose are you doing that for, apart from a psychopathic one? There's so many old phrases that are just as appropriate now, and that if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything, is really appropriate in these instances online. Because you can agree, you can disagree, you can like, you can dislike somebody, but you don't have to go into the realms where you are just mindlessly abusing somebody. We can all live pretty harmoniously. I've got a group of about 4 or 5 people in my life that I would consider friends, that I would consider close friends, that I would trust explicitly. So what I'm basically saying is, however many billion people I don't know or don't like some of them, but I don't go around abusing them, because why would I do that? But lots of people online, whether it makes them feel better about their own lives, whether it gives them a power trip for them to feel that they are having influence over somebody, even if it's so negative, they feel the need to abuse, belittle, and I will never understand that mindset. However, and this is why it's the key to talk about this morning, yes, there is a demographic of people that do that, actual people who are deeply troubled, as I said, and need help, and are projecting their dissatisfaction and their own unhappiness with their own lives onto others. But I would suggest well over half of these trolls and bots that you see online that are abusing, belittling, they're actually coordinated. They're not real people sat thinking, I'm going to go and abuse Jaymie Ike. They are people who are coordinated to try and discredit, censor, put doubt in people's minds around particular people and their ethics and their backgrounds and what they are up to and all of that. That's there to work on behalf of the system. Because all these people, of which there are many of us in different levels, that talk about alternative points of view on whatever the issues may be, whether it's talking about the grand conspiracy or whether it's just talking about a specific issue, all of us being considered untrustworthy, having doubt in people's minds about the credibility, about the ethics, about the morals, about the intentions of us, well, who does that benefit? Well, that benefits the people that don't want the population to hear and see an alternative perspective on whatever the issues may be. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that every single person that talks about something alternative is trustworthy. And you're absolutely right to question people. If there was a photograph of me, for example, sat in the palace shaking hands with King Charles, I'd expect you all to be commenting, going, what are you doing? You need to explain yourself on this. That's not what I'm saying here. Question everything is our motto here at Iconic, and I encourage everybody to do that. Question us. Question everything I say. Where does it stand up to scrutiny? Does it stand up to evidence? Are the numbers, the facts, the figures, the ones I'm giving you when we talk about specific topics, are they real? Double check them for yourself. But as I said at the top, if you're arguing in good faith, which is then when you see, actually, no, that stands up, give that person some respect. Doesn't mean you have to believe everything they say. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to like them as a person, but you can stand up and say, okay, what they've delivered there is factually accurate and it's helpful for people to know that information. That's not what the system wants. So by attempting to discredit, by attempting to put doubt in people's minds about certain individuals, that only benefits the system, doesn't it? So ask yourself this question. Why now is there seeming to be such a rise in quote-unquote trolls? People trying to discredit, people trying to silence, people trying to divide opinion. Well, it's because we're over the target. In many ways, we are over the target. Whatever the issue is you wanted to describe, whether it's what's going on in America with Trump, whether it's what happened with Charlie Kirk, whether it's what's going on in the Middle East, whether it's taxes here in Britain, whether it's immigration here in Britain. People are questioning the official narratives of all of these things now and starting to come to conclusions that the state, the system, the cult will be terrified of, because they're going to start to come to the conclusion, hang on a minute, this is all coordinated. This isn't incompetence. This isn't organic stupidity within these politicians. This is coordinated. So who is behind it? And once people start to ask that question and start to realize that borders mean nothing, and the reason that issues are happening in countries across the world and they're the same issues, the reason that the whole world reacts the same to certain issues and major things, they're going to start to look at, actually, I don't think it's Trump behind this. I don't think it's Starmer behind this. I don't think it's Macron behind this. I think this goes a level above. What's that level above? And that question will absolutely terrify the establishment, absolutely terrify the cult. Because once you start to do that, you're going to be knocking on their door very, very quickly. And for me, the reason that this effort to abuse and belittle and control the narrative coming from these bots and these trolls, the reason it's really stepped up is because they are terrified. And that is very, very exciting, because a bully does not bully from a position of strength. That's a really key fact to remember. Bullies, even going back to the stereotypical high school bully, they are normally almost exclusively very, very weak and insecure people. That's why they need to project onto others. Because if you project onto others, it stops you looking at yourselves. So bullies don't position from strength. So if they're trying to bully, belittle and break us, it's because they're scared of us. And ultimately, that's the key to always remember. They are terrified of us. They are far more terrified of me and you than we should be of them. One, because of the basic maths and the numbers on our side compared to the numbers on theirs. But the difference is they are actually very, very insignificant when compared to us. We've been conditioned, you could argue we've been genetically altered to only to be able to access a tiny percentage of our capability. When, if we had our full capability, we outshine them every day of the week. That's why they've got to keep us suppressed. That's why they've got to keep us beaten down and dumbed down. That's why they're doing that through the food and the water and the content that you're watching. Because they know if human perception really opens, their days are done. And I think we are on the cusp of that happening internationally, undeniably and irreversibly, which is a fantastic and exciting time to be alive. So stay sane, stay centered, and keep that belief when the times get tough, because they are tough and they're probably going to get tougher. But the outcome is already decided. And the outcome is that we will walk out like steel from the fire on the other side of this. Right, thanks for tuning in with me. If you're watching with us on YouTube or X, we're going to carry on iconic.com. We're going to talk about a bit of news, actually, rather than a more philosophical subject like we just did. Philosophical Friday, we might call it. We're going to look at some more emails that have come out about Epstein and Trump, and we're going to talk about a major tax U-turn here in Britain, which might make a few people breathe a sigh of relief, but is it quite as straightforward as it sounds? So click the link in the description, and I'll see you over on Iconic.